Okay, great. And we're off. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for being on the podcast on the Clarity Shift. Welcome back to all the listeners or people who are watching this on YouTube. Welcome back to the space where we explore career, business, clarity, and transitions with heart. Danielle Marshall is an equity strategist and ICF-certified executive coach with more than 20 years of leadership experience. As the founder of Culture Principles and a TEDx speaker, she helps leaders and organizations strengthen their ability to lead across difference, navigate complexity with empathy, and build high-trust, inclusive cultures. Known for her balance of compassion and candor, Danielle's coaching style invites reflection, clarity, and courage, supporting leaders to grow themselves and their organizations in meaningful, lasting ways. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Anything that you would like to add or that may have changed or that feels more resonant today, October 22nd of 2025?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's always funny to listen to your bio right back to you. And I don't know that I would say anything has changed, but something that I am finding myself focusing on more these days is absolutely helping leaders and teams navigate hard conversations. It feels like we are in the thick of things where things are polarized. We're having to define who we are, what our values are in different ways. And so I am maybe called to this moment. I can't exactly say I'm enjoying it all the way through, but I am called to lean into these conversations.
Wow. Yeah. And I don't know if we want to use or how you feel about using the DEI or like the acronyms and things like that, but anything like that that feels very like how are you navigating, I guess you as a person, but then also as your company? Is it a redefining? We're not using certain words, but still offering the same support or is all the questions, but it's more like redefining, I guess.
That's such an interesting question because I think it depends, is the answer to that. I had a mentor, some time ago say that we have to be committed more to the work than the words. And the second that she said that, like it hit my whole body and I could feel it throughout me because it is absolutely true in terms of how I approach this. I don't really care what you call things sometimes. What I'm trying to get to is how we understand it and what our commitment is to advancing it. So from that angle, I don't feel like much has changed for me, but I say that it looks different because even if I'm considering maybe some of the folks that I've worked with, either as in the organizational capacity or as I've been thinking more about like the coaching work, maybe they don't use the words or they've scrubbed their website, but I would absolutely say they're still committed to the work. We're factoring it in because it's part of who we are as people.
Yeah. And then taking a step back, how did you get into this? Or how did you shape it and make it make sense for you and all the things? Yeah,
I feel like I'm still figuring that out. But in terms of how I got into it, I come from the nonprofit sector originally, and I spent 20 years of my career working pretty much in every level of a nonprofit. I was a volunteer, I was on the program team, a fundraiser, I was the executive director. So I literally sat in every seat in a nonprofit organization. And I worked with several. And sort of the genesis of like how I started my own business is one of the things that I saw even as a early professional. So we're talking back when I was in my 20s, is I lived all around the country, worked again with multiple nonprofits, but I kept hearing this very persistent narrative about who the children were that we served and who their families were. And so I primarily was working with Black and Brown communities. And people had a lot to say about who these children were, who their families were. Oftentimes it was not positive. It felt very limiting. But the big thing, Raquel, is a lot of these folks that we're talking about them weren't from the communities that we were working with ourselves. Right. And so I saw in that moment a limitation because of how they were discussed and the narrative that was emerging. But also, like, I'm thinking about how the kids see themselves, how the families see themselves when someone's always telling you this is who you are, rather than allowing you to define who you are. So I mentioned that context because it then informed a lot of the work that came later for me, because I think even as I stayed with nonprofits for that 20-year stretch, I was always really interested in like narrative shifting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And my background happens to be in industrial organizational psychology. And so a lot of that is around change management, like the psychology of organizations. And so I was starting to put those two things together in my mind and ask this bigger question of, is it just the narrative or is it the systems? And you know what happens when we ask a or question, right? I'm like, nope, it's both. It's both and in this moment.
Yeah.
And so I started to think more about how I applied my expertise in like organizational psychology to really deepening the impact. The outcomes that these kids and their families were facing weren't because there was a deficit in them, but there was most certainly a deficit in the system.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how we arrived at this place. And I had been doing quite a bit of equity work in my last nonprofit before I left. And even in those final moments, I was like, this is the work that I need to be doing. And so that's how Cultural Principles ultimately was born.
Oh my gosh. And how did you know, or how did you take the step to get into nonprofit? For some other context, I talked about in maybe last year, because I started the podcast. It's been a while since people have heard, I think, the full breadth of my story. I was an intern at this place called Centronia. I don't know if you know here, because we're in the DMV. Not to
we're gonna have to talk about that, because I do know them, as a matter of fact.
Great. And so I didn't intentionally start my journey in the nonprofit world, but I was gravitated towards it because, well, one, my mom worked has worked. Maybe you've heard, they're called Carlos Rosario. They're a charter school. I don't necessarily know all the differences of like charter school and all these other things,
Sure.
but I just mention it because they also serve Black and Brown communities and getting people tools and resourced. And so they're right next door, and my mom recommended. And so I asked because I don't know if nonprofit chose me. I've been kind of in and out of, and it's beautiful work. It's hard. I will say, I think it was a couple years ago. So like moving forward from my early 20s, but moving back in time, now I'm in my early 30s. There was this nonprofit called TechnoServe based in Roslyn, Virginia. And the mission, I think, is more agricultural and helping countries in third world, what I like to call global South, or what I think is also referenced in some literature, the global South, and help those countries get resourced internally. But it's with the expectation of meeting, I think, the US standards or the global North standards.
Got it.
So I guess that's a second question, but I just wanted to preface with the intentionality. Did you choose it? Did you fall into it? And then two, as you navigated, how did it feel? At least I say this because I really struggled with the paradigm of working with this, like the global North. People in the United States can tell people in the global South what to do as if they're fixing their problems. Yep. And yet they created the problems that they're doing. So that's a whole other thing, but I just wanted to kind of get you with the two questions that I have in mind.
That one feels heavy. So all right. So for the first question, I kind of fell into nonprofit. So when I was in college, I was a radio, TV, film major.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I am not built for radio, TV, film. And so I don't know that I've actually shared this publicly with anyone, but I interned. So in high school, I had finished my credits a semester early.
Oh,
but at the time, they didn't let you graduate. So you could take an internship. And so I got to intern, and I'm growing up in New York City. I interned on the Geraldo Rivera show.
Oh,
okay. It was an interesting choice but remember, I'm going into radio, TV, film.
Yeah.
That was an interesting experience. That's how I'm going to frame it right now. There were lots of things that I learned through, being an intern there in terms of like how you get audience engagement and like what production looks like and all of these things. But there also was like a very dark side to being in that production studio at that time, where I just watched people act in ways that I thought were somewhat cutthroat. Like
Mm.
we're always jockeying for position. I saw folks, sometimes steal other people's ideas. And I was just thinking like, that's not who I am at my core,
Yeah.
right? I'm about community. I am about uplifting people. Like I wanted something different, but nonetheless, like I was in the internship, so you got to finish it, right? And so I walked through that process, but quickly realized that wasn't for me.
Okay.
Now I graduate and I go on to college. And I'm sitting in radio, TV, film because that is my major. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I saw what it looked like on the back end. And I'm so grateful to this day that I had that opportunity because I would have never known until maybe too late for me, right, to pivot.
Yeah.
So having said all of that, one day I just happened to be walking into the cafeteria and there were some tables outside and there was an AmeriCorps program. And they were recruiting people, and someone just asked the magic question to me. They're like, "Do you like kids?" And I'm like, "I love kids. Lunch can wait. Let's talk about this." And so, because of that one question that was asked, I ended up signing up as an AmeriCorps member and did 2 tours of America with a program called Jumpstart for Young Children, where we were working with preschoolers, right, on language and literacy skills. And so, like that blended so much of my worlds together. But from that time and working with that program, when I graduated, I actually went on to become a site coordinator, is what they called it at the time, for one of the universities. So I worked at LSU. That was my first job out of college, running that nonprofit. And so I very much feel like it found me. But the second that it found me, I was like, oh, I'm home.
Oh, wow.
I'm home.
Wow.
So to now say, like, I spent 20 plus years doing that, it definitely feels like home. And even as a consultant and coach now, I primarily focus on nonprofits. So I don't know that I'm leaving the sector. But to get to your second question.
Yeah.
As much as I love nonprofits, we are often problematic. Right. So as I'm sharing this story about the narratives, I was picking up these narratives in the nonprofits I was working with, right? With funders that were around me, with, other quote unquote partners who want it good for the community. And I'm like, but do you?
Yes. Right.
Because I was listening to the things that they were saying about the kids and the families. And I'm like, I literally work with them every single day. I know this is not the full picture. And sometimes I knew that was just outright trash. It wasn't true.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's always been that tension. And that's really difficult because like I believe in nonprofits because oftentimes they are serving a niche that no one else is covering.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But you can't be asking people to step into oppressive systems in order to raise them out of said oppression.
That's right. Wow. That's huge. Yeah. And I think that was, I'm going to put a pin in my thought. Can we talk about the money part of nonprofit? Because a lot of my audience, they're either in the 9-to-5, and the 9-to-5 could be nonprofit. It could be the private sector. It could be government. I mean, the 9-to-5 could be anything. Or they're starting a business. And so, finding meaning, making meaning for themselves and getting paid for it and being open and all that. And so when I say that for context as we talk, I want to ask a question about why it's hard to get paid in nonprofit in a way that feels sustainable. And then I remember being on the communication side of getting the funding and being part of the marketing of, okay, what are the proposals and what are the marketing and how are we going to do the and so I don't know if I have a specific question in there as much as just addressing an overall mindset question around money in the nonprofit world specifically, because I feel like it would be relevant for those of us who are in business, who are making meaning and wanting to get paid and niching, and also the people who are in 9-to-5 aren't necessarily in it for the money, like they're trying to make meaning in a system that can be oppressive. And so it's like, how do we make meaning regardless and get paid or like deal with money when these systems, for specifically a nonprofit, it feels challenging, like there's already a limit to that, perhaps, I don't know.
I may ask you to rephrase that slightly for me, because I want to focus on what sort of is most important to you? So when you say you feel like there's a challenge around money in the nonprofit sector, what challenge are you experiencing? Because I'm sure people are experiencing many different things.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I was in the nonprofit, and I will also say I've only been in nonprofit, I think 4 or 5 jobs in my 10, 15 jobs
Sure.
I've had in my thing. So maybe I'm not the most, I don't have as much experience in that, but there was a limit as far as what I saw in terms of asking for raise, which was different than in the private sector, or the pay gap was already, let's say, less than what my other colleagues who also did communications and marketing in the area. And then even going back when I was an intern, I will admit when I had student loans and I took the opportunity, I was like, okay, it's non-paid, I'm getting experience. But at what point could I become part of the Centronia, the company, to start getting valued in a financial way? And so I think that's the bigger piece. It's like, how does nonprofits think about money? And I get that there's gaps because they're nonprofit, but but it's also this kind of balance. You have to feed or like provide for the people working because they to do the work, but then the work, yeah.
So I think what I would say to that is it depends. Because I've worked with some smaller nonprofits that maybe they only had about $300,000. Let's say that's their annual budget, right? And that's a very small nonprofit. And I've worked with nonprofits that are $50 million plus. Wow. And so, it changes the nature of the conversation when you look at the size. And so I'm not saying right or wrong. I have seen the nonprofit sort of complex make a lot of changes over the years. And to their credit, I think people are starting to think a lot more about equitable pay within the nonprofit structure because they know that they are competing with the corporations, the small businesses, the me working for myself, right? And I'm always going to pay myself more fairly than I think other people will in that situation. And so because that, they have sort of that lens, like if we want quality people to not only come apply here, but accept the job and then ultimately stay so that we have a higher level of retention, they have had to make some adjustments. But I think it's also very difficult to say like, hey, I want a 6-figure job when I work at a nonprofit that only has a $300,000 budget. And you know what I mean? Like if there are 3 of us here, and we're each getting paid $100,000, where is the money for the programming? Right? Where is the service volume? And that's not going to happen. So a lot of times in those smaller nonprofits, they're adjusting the pay scale down, or it may even be instead of a full-time job, they're offering you 20 hours a week because that is what they can afford at that moment. And I think people choose to move into nonprofits for a variety of reasons. I don't hear too often people saying I'm going in for the money. That's not the thing I hear.
No.
But most of the time it's because people have some affinity for the work that's being done. Like I care about kids. I care about literacy. I care about planting trees. Whatever, the thing is that they're focused on, that's the reason that they're there. But having said that, they still need to be able to sustain their families, right? We have to pay mortgages or car notes or whatever it is, student loan debt, lots of people have. So that can be challenging. Now, I say all of that so that maybe in particular for your audience who is in the process of thinking about like careers, you have to do your own homework to figure out what is this organization I'm applying to. Right? What is their budget? Go look at their 990s online and see how much money they've brought in over the last couple of years. And if there are any red flags. Like those are the things I wish I would have understood more when I was a young professional, because if I went in and saw like, hey, this organization was doing really great for all these years, and all of a sudden there's this massive revenue drop, I need to be asking better questions about what is happening.
Wow.
Right? What's happening in that moment? The other thing that I'll say that I've seen a lot more nonprofits do, not all of them, and if you are a nonprofit leader, I'm encouraging you to do this in this moment. But they're starting to put their pay scales on their position descriptions. And to me, that is like so valuable, because if you are, let's say you're a mid-level professional, or even if you're a senior person, I'm not necessarily looking for a job that starts at 30 to 40,000, right? Like that's not where I am in my career. And so if I see that the job might look fantastic to me, but the second that I see that pay scale, it tells me I'm not going to waste my time and I'm not going to waste yours, right? It's not the right position for me. I need to look for something that is better aligned with the skills, the level that I'm at, my experience, et cetera. And so that's less about necessarily the company at that point, and more the onus comes to us as the applicants for these jobs to say, like, does it even feel right?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, my main question is, do you have any other, because I love that recommended. I mean, I've never heard that before. Look at how that company is doing financially and do that. I mean, I think in the career world, umbrella world, there's the doing the homework to make the resume or the cover letter, whatever, but doing even deeper. So I guess, are there any experiences that you've had that specific advice has helped you, or are there any other kind of tips and tricks that you wish you would have? I'm trying to get out of your
Yeah, no, I'm laughing as you say that, because totally, I turned down a position because I looked at their 990. I went through the interview process still because I was very curious, but because I looked at it and I saw this drop off in revenue and what was happening on the back end, the position was for an executive director role. And so my job, primarily, one of the biggest functions was fundraising. And so I walked in the door and they were like, yeah, everything's great. We'd be so excited for you to start. And I'm like, tell me about this gap in fundraising, right? Like, what's been happening here? What's going on? And like, I could see the body language shift in the room, and people got really uncomfortable because it's like they didn't want to name the thing. But basically what they were asking me after I asked more questions and got down to it is they were like, you have to raise your own salary. And I was like, there's no way in the world I'm taking a job from day one where I have to raise my salary.
No. Wow. And I'm curious, do you remember? If you don't, it's okay, but did they advertise? Because usually they say it depends on experience, or they give a range. I'm curious how they even posted for the role.
I don't remember, because this was now some time ago. I don't remember if they had specifically put that criteria down. What I do remember, though, is like in any nonprofit, like if you were applying for a fundraising or executive director, they will just say, like, we have an annual budget of $5 million a year, of which, the executive director and development director are expected to contribute to. So, okay, I'm fine with that. But what this particular instance told me, they didn't even have the salary that they were promising me secured.
Wow.
And so that's a different level than saying you're responsible for raising. Like, I get that. That's a major function for these roles. If you can't guarantee that 2 months down the line, you're going to be able to pay me unless I bring in additional revenue, that is a problem.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, that feels like a bait and switch. Here's this awesome job. We're going to give you a 6-figure salary. Oh, by the way, that salary is contingent upon your own success right now. And we're not even going to give you the leadway, right? And the ramp up time to get it. We can only pay you for these first 2 months.
Wow. That sounds wow. I mean, I've never experienced something like, or heard. So I'm kind of blown. I'm just processing.
Me too. Me too.
Wow. I mean, and to be at that level, there's, I guess, an assumption being made that this person can do it and run with it. But the assumption also is we can get them, like you said, the bait and switch, and because of the title or whatever. And I guess going on to that, what advice or recommendations would you provide for the people who, I would say specifically in the 9 to 5, get I don't know, attracted to titles? Because I feel like that I have a friend who, she doesn't want to move from a certain salary or a certain title because she just wants to stay in a certain thing. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's different. I mean, sure, it could be in the nonprofit world and in the private sector. But I guess overall, the question I'm trying to formulate as I form the thoughts, is about titles. And, you know, I guess in the nonprofit, sticking to nonprofit world, I think usually they'll say, not a nonprofit, I guess this is in general, you know, the job description, this isn't just it, like more things can get involved.
Duties as assigned or duties as
duties
necessary.
Exactly. And so I guess to that effect, trying to be, I guess, devil's advocate or seeing the other side, is there opportunity or is there a possibility people get attracted to a title with seeing that there's a possibility for whatever type of growth? And I don't know, it could be financial, but then I guess what would you say to the people who are looking primarily at the title piece and using that as the North Compass? Because I'm just hearing this story, and I guess what's going through my mind is the title was the biggest kind of calling card. It's like, oh, you get to be executive director, but actually we can't pay you or whatever. So I guess I'm trying to vouch for the people that are, I don't want them to get stuck.
Yeah. So let me say a couple of things. For me, the title wasn't the draw. It was the type of work I wanted to be doing. Right. So I did not mind fundraising. I did not mind managing a team. These were actually things that I gravitated to. Like I liked the oversight at that time in my professional career. Of all of these different things. And I've always been someone who is like to have my hand in a lot of different pots, if you will, because that's just how my brain sort of functions. So it wasn't the title, right? I actually even had people question me in my decisions when I started to apply for these. They're like, are you sure that's what you want to do? And so like they understood the weight that came with it, right? So like I would, number one, make sure that for folks that are looking for whatever, whether it is a manager, a director, an executive director, CEO, when you identify that title, do you really understand what comes with it? Right? It may look good on paper to say, like, I am at the executive level. I have served as the, you know, CEO. I've served as the vice president, ... But do you understand what the roles and responsibilities are, both on paper, but then in the actuality of your day-to-day? Because at this point in my life, I'm not going to say I would never do this work again, but it's less likely for me because I've had that experience. I did enjoy it and I'm ready to move on to other things. So, you know, I say never say never. The second I do, I'm going to find myself back in that seat. But when I think about it today, I'm like, I want something different. So that leads me to the second thing that I would consider for folks that are maybe hung up on the title is what does success look like for you? Right? If all I can say is that success is this title, to what end? I have it, but am I happy? Right. So when people say that they're looking to make this career transition, they want to move up the ladder, that's great. Can we narrow down like why? So if you say to me that I want an increase in salary, I want additional responsibility, I want to do this type of work. All of those are completely acceptable to me. But my question back to them would be, do you need this title to do that?
Yeah, right. 100%. Yeah.
You know, like I run my own business now. A lot of what I learned as an executive director, I implement daily, except I don't work for anyone else anymore.
Right.
So like I have all of what I wanted out of that. And then I've left behind some things that I wasn't too crazy about.
That's right. Yeah.
So you get to define that for yourself. The other thing that I would say is maybe for people that are younger in their career journeys, is to think about like the path that you're on. There are certain industries and sectors where the title actually is going to matter. They might not hire you as a director if you've never been a director before. Right. So maybe you need that title, which is also ironic because if I've never been a director before and you won't hire me for that reason, how do I become a director? Right. So like there is this cycle that continues, but also it's one of those things that I caution people to pay attention to because it's also a gatekeeping mechanism.
Yes.
Right. How do I get in if you won't give me a chance to get in? And they're saying you don't have enough experience. How do I get experience if you will not provide opportunities for me to get said experience? And so to that end, like then the next thing that I would say is look for in whatever your role is, ways to build that experience. If you know where you're headed, right? I want to move up to this next level in my organization, another organization. What are the skills that are going to be valuable to this next employer?
Yeah.
To make them want to hire me. that I can build today at whatever level of the organization. I don't care if you're the intern or you're the VP. What do you need to have in your portfolio in order to demonstrate the impact that you can bring to this new company?
That's beautiful. That's so important. Yeah, because I feel that's still a trend. I mean, I still see on Instagram or wherever, how do I get a job without experience? And it's just, I don't know. I maybe it's a part of my own privilege, or just because I'm no longer in the early stages of my career that I don't think about it anymore. But I mean, we've all been through it in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure. And it just seems to be a thing, a constant. And I don't, do you, part of in your business, do you, is this something that you help inform or mitigate in terms of this specific, I don't know what to call it, if it's the accessibility of opportunities or its positioning of individuals, or even the way organizations think about, because it's, when I did a stint at Uber, and I loved, and I think I talked about this with you off of the recording, that I loved their approach. It was the first time I had ever seen a type of work culture. And granted, they started as a startup, and so it's inherent in some sense that they have a different culture than a nonprofit or a private sector for-profit. But I loved that they were always giving the horizontal opportunities, that we don't always have to go up. We can go sideways and diagonally and you can try a project, try being on another team for 2-3 months. And so I'm wondering, is this whole big theme something that you work in your work? Are there strategies or things that you see maybe changing, or things that might be helpful?
Yeah. So it's not necessarily that it's the focal point of my work, but it does come up in my work.
Okay.
Because, and the reason I say that is a lot of the work that I'm doing, at some point, we're going to touch on professional development. Okay.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about professional development, I will hear periodically leaders say, like, we really like this person, but they don't want to grow in this company, right? They've plateaued. And like, to me, as I hear that, I'm like, you have created, again, a narrative around who this individual is. I said, have you asked them what's important to them, right? What success looks like to them? Because there is a point in time where one might, I like the level that I'm at, right? I don't aspire to go any higher. And it's not because they're lazy. They actually enjoy the work that they're doing. And someone needs to do that. Right. And so I'm like, what is the problem with that? And even if we stayed, right, like the work still has to get done. So why are we complaining?
Right.
But if I stayed in this role, it does not mean that I've plateaued on my growing. Maybe I'm deepening the skills to make me better at this job.
Wow.
Right. So I don't, like, let's say I want to be a director and someone's like, hey, we have this executive director role or this VP role opening. Would you be interested? And I'm like, absolutely not. I want to be in this moment the best director I can be, right? So what do I need to strengthen? If I'm the program director, maybe I need to work on how I bring in more volunteers to our program, or how I can make the impact we're having on children, families, etc., more deep than they're at right now. Or I need to look at evaluation differently. There are always new techniques that we can learn in our respective roles that do not require us to move up, because that's someone else's definition of success. Okay. So that's the first thing that I would say, is be clear about who you are and what you ultimately want, right? Stop letting other people drive your outcomes, and be bold enough to say, this is what I want for myself. And even in that statement, it doesn't mean you have to stay there. It just means today, this is what I want. Tomorrow, I can want something completely different, because that is my right.
That's right. That's right.
That is my right. So that's one way I see it coming up.
Okay.
The second way that I see it coming up, and I especially am going to say this with nonprofits, because I don't have as much experience on the corporate level to say whether or not this happens in mass. Nonprofits have got to do a better job with succession planning, hands down. So I'm going to go back to like when I was a 20-something-year-old, like, and I had something to prove at that point, right? Like, I'm like, let me show you what I can do. Thought I knew everything, don't know anything, quite frankly. But I was eager. And I would ask people, can I participate in this project? Can I get involved in this thing? You know, like I'm looking for the growth opportunities. And there were so many times where people in one way or another made it abundantly clear. They're like, oh, you don't think yet at a high enough level. You're not strategic enough. You're not ... right? Or you have to let the leadership team handle this. And I'm thinking to myself, even as my 20-year-old, you know, Danielle, eventually you all are going to retire. You cannot be here forever. If you are not training the next generation, if you are not thinking about what happens when you have to exit, either because you're ready to retire, or unfortunately, sometimes life calls us home before we plan for it. Right? I don't know. And so if there is no succession plan, who will take over when it is time for me to exit this organization?
That's right.
And it is not a immediate, I can make this decision just like that. Like, you should have been seeding these skills in your team to begin with all along.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. Professional development. When we do our annual reviews every year, one of the questions I hope we would be asking people is like, in what ways do you want to grow? Are there other positions here that you're thinking about, whether they're lateral or upward? It doesn't really matter. Are there skills that would be useful on your journey? Because that both means that we're thinking about sort of the succession planning, but additionally, I think it's a retention tool. Like, when people feel like you care about them and you're invested in their ultimate development, whether they're in this company or they move on, they want to stay.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So yeah.
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, because it's what came to mind for me was two things. One is, I'm curious where you have seen, or what your analysis has been of where these narratives come from, because I think we talked a little bit about previously off the recording about generations and culture and what culture and all these different things, and your business is called that's the name, Cultural Principles. I'm curious, the name, is that where but I'm wondering where the narratives are coming from, because or the assumptions, or whatever it is, because is it that an older generation, whatever it is, we can say boomers or whatever the older, that they already have a certain mentality, and when they kind of I don't know if started this kind of level of work, but it's kind of just continued on, and so we're seeing the after effects, or we're still seeing the residual of that, or is it because we're in the United States? Like, I'm just curious, what have you seen any the origin of trying to help the people, like, get into the minds of the people they're working for, or you know, mitigating some of these things?
That's such an interesting question that you're posing, because in terms of the origin of narratives, they come from us, you, me.
Okay.
You know, whoever preceded us, our forefathers, foremothers, that's where they come from. People are the creators of the narrative. And so, like, yes, we could say, like, if we're thinking about, you know, the most senior generation, I think for the majority of people that are working right now are still like the boomers, right? So they came with a story that they told about their work environments, what it meant to be successful, who got to get ahead, what getting ahead looked like. They had their own narrative. Okay. Right. But now you can position that against every generation who has come behind them and how that story has changed. But who is the author of it? It is us. We tell the story. So, like, when I look at Gen Z right now, and I have a daughter who's Gen Z, and she tickles me all the time, how they see the world and work, like, they're telling a completely different story than the boomers did, than the Gen Xers, millennials, etc. Because Gen Z is standing out loud and proud in this moment, and they're like, nope, we want hybrid work environments. We want to work remotely. I don't actually want to work all these hours, 40 hours. That doesn't work. 50, you can forget about it. I want something different.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're basically authoring in this moment, real time, a brand new narrative that if we fast forward another 50 years, other generations are going to look at them and be like, what's wrong with these Gen Zs? They're holding me stagnant. Why can't we move ahead? Right. We have to be able to understand that the narratives come from all of us collectively. But the question is, what do we want to do when we find ourselves faced with these particular storylines?
Right, right. And that's why I ask, because I feel like when I read a book, we start with the beginning. We start with how did things start, and then some people, I'm not trying to out my friends, but they'll skip to the end, and we just want to get to the resolution. But it's
Yeah,
like we have to go through the journey, because then we miss the whole plot. Then why read the book in the first place?
yeah.
So I'm curious. I hear that we are the authors, but I still kind of want to push back as far as, like, have you seen themes maybe of, like,
Mhm.
are there tendencies of why maybe executives or leadership have certain assumptions? Because I've also seen it. Why don't you want the promotion? Or why didn't you do this thing? Or I don't know. I'm curious. Maybe this is a North American thing, because I'll sometimes watch YouTube from the UK or whatever it is, and they're like, we honor our holidays, and they get 30 days of the year versus we get 2 weeks. And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you've seen in your work.
I don't
Yeah.
want to say this as like the be all end all, because I think there are many reasons that, we could say factor into how we've arrived here. But one of the things in this country is, we function very much on a dominant cultural system here. Our work, from the times that we were in factories and agriculture and all of this, was so much of it was centered around this Protestant work ethic that you were not valuable unless you're producing. And so when I think about, like, maybe how older generations think about work, there wasn't the conversation that we're having today about wellness, self-care, taking time off to actually simply be. It was, you are not productive, or excuse me, you're not valuable unless you're productive, i.e., be here every day exactly, at 8 o'clock before the whistle blows, so that you can punch in and be ready to make the widgets on the assembly line.
That's
Now,
right.
our world has evolved in many ways, because we are not necessarily centered in those types of jobs anymore, which I think allowed a little bit more freedom for people to push back, because I may not have to punch a clock at every job. I may not have to be on the assembly line where my only job is making the widgets, right? Work has definitely expanded. And I think in that expansion, it allowed people space to question things differently, right? Why does this have to be true? Right? Am I happy with this? Does this particular behavior or policy serve me? And so I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, definitely since the pandemic, is a lot of emphasis on the fact that these policies and ways of being when we're at work don't serve us. But I do think we're in a pivotal moment in time where we're going to also have to be really careful, because there are people currently who would like to see us return to widget making and factory assembly lines, right? They're actively promoting that. But when we go that direction, and I'm not saying that to cancel out anyone's job who does that, right? Like, that is a valuable job. If you earn your wages doing that, by all means, continue. But I think it's not a reality most of us want to return to in this country. We have to be careful about how we proceed when the power, if you will, the people in power, the ones who hold the money, the big corporations, are saying, you need to follow these rules to a T, or you can't be employed here anymore. So we're almost giving up some of the rights and the progress we've made, if you will, to go back to a time when you literally were just a cog in the wheel.
Right. So what have been maybe some, we're kind of coming to the end, so I want to have two final questions, but I want to just kind of tee up this part about, if I'm a 20-year-old starting specifically, let's say, in the nonprofit world, how can I, and also this may or may not have a lot to do with your work, AI, and the AI in nonprofit. I don't know how they're using it or if they're using it. But the main question I want to ask is how to have the conversations, or knowing that there are assumptions and current paradigms that I will be navigating. And I want to do the work, and it's not about money. How do I navigate? Or what are some, I guess, best practices that you've seen throughout your career that have stood the test of time perhaps that can really help people in these chaotic times. Yeah.
You know, I haven't thought about this for a long time, but what I would say pretty much at any level of your career, especially maybe for the younger folks, what is it that you want to do? And what's your why behind that? And I'm someone who's very big on like figuring out what your why is and leading with your why, because I fundamentally believe when the road gets difficult, and it always will, your why is the thing that keeps you grounded. So if I say that I want to work in this particular nonprofit in, you know, this type of, again, we're planting trees, right? We're an environmental organization. Why do I want to do that? What does that ultimately mean for me, for my community? What are the reasons that are sort of leading me to this moment? Because you have to make choices around that. And something that I think is going to be also like really important is sometimes the why shifts how you think about what's relevant in that job. And I might not care in some instances about the money so much because I get to do this thing that I am so passionate about. Like I would almost do it for free, right? I love it that. But in other circumstances, and I am not advocating, by the way, for anybody to work for free because we do not do that. We do not do that, folks. However, having said that, in some cases, money is the only reason that you're showing up every day. You're like, I hate it here, and I got to pay my rent this month. What is your why? Right? Like, so I think if we can ground ourselves there, that like that's the ultimate starting place for me. I'm trying to think if there are other things like and actually I'm going to give one other piece of advice because I pretty much tell everybody this at this point. I wish younger Danielle knew about informational interviews.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So for folks who are not familiar with a informational interview, literally you are reaching out to someone who has either achieved something you want to achieve, they're working in an industry, at a company, there's something that you would like to understand from their perspective. Okay. You're going to set up, like literally you can email them, or if you meet them, you know, this is a quick exchange. Hi, I've been following your work. I'm very interested in understanding XYZ about your company or sector. Would you mind if we set up a 20 to 30 minute conversation, like coffee chat, Zoom, whatever works. But the idea is you keep it short. And from there, like I tell people to build in like 3 to 4 questions. You don't want too much information that you're asking them because we're going to keep this short. But I want to start off by saying, you know, hi, thank you again for this meeting. Here's a very brief, less than 2 minutes overview of who I am, why I'm coming to you right now for information. And then we begin to ask questions, right? How did you get into this industry? Is there, you know, are there particular materials that you read, resources, so forth? Are there other folks I should be connecting with? Are there pitfalls like I should be aware of right now in your industry? Like what keeps you up at night? So like having a standardized list of questions that you can ask in brief conversation is incredibly important. But the biggest thing that I've learned from this is once you start that conversation, shut up and listen. Listen. Right? It's really hard for us sometimes because we all want to jump in with this story about like how this one time when you worked in this place, this thing happened to you. But if I only have 20 minutes of this person's time and you have some information I need, my job is to ask and be quiet and step out the way.
I love that. And I feel like it's so important as, I mean, I mentioned a little bit AI, and I don't know the relevance much of that in nonprofit, but I love that because it's soaking it in, learning from it, an actual human being who has lived the experience. And I mean, I will say to the audience, if they don't know already, I pay for ChatGPT. I do my 20 months, $20 a month. And I do it because I'm a team of one, and I get a lot of value from it. So, you know, doing the questions maybe in ChatGPT, what are the great questions I can do in an interview? Because I do feel that AI is going to be a big thing, but the importance, like underlining, underscoring, highlighting all the things, human engagement and reaching out and networking. And I also didn't know about that when I was younger. So I love that advice. My last 2 questions to kind of wrap up our conversation. One is, what type of media could be book, I'm sorry, a particular book, show, movie, or music, a song that has changed or shaped your life, and how?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so what I actually am thinking about is both a book and a movie. And it's a little bit early. Oh gosh, I don't even remember. It's definitely, I'm gonna say at least 10 years ago. The book slash movie is called The Life of Pi. How do you know that?
I love that. The author has my same birthday, which is why whenever
really?
somebody brings it up, I'm like, oh my God.
That's funny. Yeah. So Jan Martel wrote the book.
Yes.
And I feel like, so just to set the context for listeners, like what happened with this, audiobooks were pretty new to me, like when this first came out. So I think I was listening to like CDs in my car. I was driving from Charlottesville back to Baltimore. Okay. I got to my house at the time, and I probably had 20 minutes left of this audiobook. And because it's on a CD, it's not like you can pause it on your phone and know exactly where you're stopping or starting. I drove all this way back. It's like 4 hours plus with traffic. I refused to get out of the car until I finished it. So I'm sitting there, legs crossed. I'm like, I can make it. I don't have to go to the bathroom, not bad. And I'm just listening to this book because it was so just amazing to me on so many levels. But to that point, why I feel like it changed my life in so many different ways is the whole premise of this book is I think it challenges us to see the same story, the same moment through multiple perspectives, right? Yeah. And then choose the version that ultimately speaks most to you. Yeah. Now, as a coach, as a leader, I was like, this, because I think it in so many ways, and I didn't realize this until like you were sort of asking this question, but like it shaped my approach to leadership because we don't have to agree on a single truth to find meaning or connection. We just have to stay curious enough to like explore the story. And so much of that was present in that book for me. And, I think that when I think about storytelling overall, storytelling and narrative is a survival tool. We all need something to believe in, right? Whether it is, again, purpose, people, possibility.
Yeah.
Because we need something to endure the unknown. And like at this exact moment in time, again, I feel like this is so important. It's so important.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. My last question is any final things that you want to, any final thing, mic drop moment, no pressure, anything that you would like, I guess, to leave the listeners in this moment after everything. I know I've already asked you for so much advice, but if there's one thing that maybe will really feel actionable or move the needle or just anything you want to speak to. Yeah. Please.
I guess the thing that I will say is I am challenging people in this moment to lean into curiosity. At a time where our world feels deeply divided on pretty much every issue, I think it is time for us to put down assumptions about people, about groups, about organizations, and actually get curious. So even if you hold the belief about who these individuals are, how can we get closer to the truth? That's the thing that I would say. And I say closer because there's never any absolute truth. How do we get closer to making meaning?
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. I knew there was a mic drop moment. I wasn't trying to put pressure, but I knew it's always there.
You're funny.
And where can people find you, work with you, share your work, all the good stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So they can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to get in touch with me. Or you can visit my website, which is www.culture-principles.com. And I know you're going to drop that in the show notes, so I'll make sure you have everything.
Yes, I will. Well, this was spectacular. Thank you so much, Danielle, for your time, wisdom, energy, experience, all the good things.
Yeah. This was my pleasure. This was a really fun conversation to have. And you kind of took me down memory lane. So I always appreciate that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you everyone for listening. You can find the video on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, the transcripts and everything is on Substack. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.